The year was 1865, and the West stretched out like an endless scar across the earth, raw and unforgiving. The sun bled into the horizon, casting long shadows over a land that gave nothing freely. Out there in the dry grass and dust-choked winds, humanity was a fragile thing, held together by the thinnest of threads. For some, the frontier was a place to dream. For others, it was a place to conquer. For most, it was a grave. The wagon train had set out days earlier, bound for a promise of land and fresh beginnings. But hope had no place beneath the weight of rifles and greed. The attack came fast, shadows rising over the ridgeline, rifles cracking, horses screaming. The world turned to chaos. Men fell first, cut down where they stood. Children were silenced in screams that broke off too quickly. And in the middle of it all, a woman named Clara fought to hold on, her hands clutching the edges of the wagon as flames licked at its canvas. She had come west with her husband, Samuel, chasing a dream of soil rich enough to raise crops, of a cabin that could hold laughter. But dreams shattered quickly on this land. They took Samuel first. She saw him fall, a bullet carving red across his chest, the weight of him folding to the dirt before her eyes. She screamed, and her scream carried across the prairie, but no one came. Rough hands seized her, dragging her from the burning wreckage, pressing her face into the dirt until the taste of blood and dust mixed on her tongue. She kicked, she bit, she clawed, but the men laughed at her fury, ropes binding her wrists before she could rise again. The others were slaughtered or scattered. She was not given the mercy of a quick end. They dragged her across the field to a place marked by 4 blackened posts, hammered deep into the ground like sentinels waiting for prey. There they stretched her out, ropes tightening against her wrists and ankles until her body strained against its own limits. She gasped as pain lanced through her shoulders, her dress torn and stained with dust, sweat, and blood. Her cries echoed against the hills, but the prairie swallowed them whole. When the men stepped back, she saw him for the first time, the one who commanded them, a man broad-shouldered and still in the strength of his years, with eyes as flat as the plains themselves. His clothes were neat, a leather vest, a clean hat that shielded him from the sun, boots polished despite the dirt of the trail. He looked less like a raider than a rancher, but the cruelty in his expression marked him for what he was. He didn't raise his voice, didn't brandish his weapon with wild bravado. He didn't need to. His presence alone silenced the others. "You thought you could carve a life here," he said, his voice steady, almost casual. "But this land don't belong to you. It never did. It belongs to those who take it." Clara spat, the dirt and blood making her words raw. "You'll hang for this." The man smiled thinly, crouching near her. His shadow cut across her face as he studied her like a hawk might study prey. "There's no law here. Only me. And the law of me says you'll die slow or you'll live long enough to wish you had." Her heart pounded, fear rattling through her like the tremble of a struck drum. Yet beneath the terror was something else, a spark that refused to die. She thought of Samuel, of his laugh when the sun set behind the hills, of the way his hand steadied hers when the trail seemed too long. She would not let his death mean nothing. She would not break for this man, no matter how tightly the ropes cut into her flesh. The rancher rose and turned, his boots crunching on dry soil. "Leave her," he ordered. "The sun will take care of what we don't." The men laughed again, muttering as they mounted their horses. One spat near her head before riding off, dust clouds rising in their wake. Soon, the sound of hooves faded into the distance, leaving her with only the low moan of the wind and the aching pull of her bonds. A horse lingered nearby, tethered and waiting, its breath steady and unconcerned. She glared at it as though the beast bore witness to her humiliation. Hours dragged like days. The sun climbed high, its heat pressing down until sweat stung her eyes and her lips cracked. Flies gathered where blood trickled from her wrists. Pain gnawed at her limbs, each breath shallow and jagged. She closed her eyes, forcing herself to remember better days, the smell of bread in the cabin back east, the hum of Samuel's voice reading aloud by lamplight. Memory was her shield. memory, and the promise she whispered into the dust, "They will not own me." Shadows stretched as the sun sank, the air cooling into sharp night. Coyotes cried in the distance, their howls rising like a chorus of the damned. Clara shivered, though sweat still clung to her skin, her body racked with fatigue. Her eyes fought to stay open, but every blink seemed to last longer than the one before. Fear clawed at her, fear not of death, but of dying forgotten, one more soul swallowed by a land already littered with bones. Then a sound, soft at first, like the brush of boots through grass. Her eyes snapped open, her body tensing despite the ropes. The noise grew closer, measured steps, careful, deliberate. She strained to see through the darkness. The horse shifted, ears twitching as if it too sensed the approach. Her breath caught, every nerve taut. Someone was coming. She could not see their face yet, could not know if it was friend or foe. All she knew was this: the night was no longer empty, and fate had not yet finished with her. The prairie wind carried the steps nearer, the silence between each one heavy as a gun cocking. Clara's heart thundered, her body screaming for release. Hope flickered, wild and dangerous, in her chest. Whoever approached, whatever their purpose, this was the moment her story would turn. And bound beneath the stars of a merciless sky, she prayed that when dawn came, she would still have the strength to fight. The footsteps came closer, steady against the dry earth, until a figure broke through the darkness. Clara held her breath, her eyes burning as she strained to see. Moonlight caught the outline of a man, his form lean and deliberate, moving with the cautious grace of one accustomed to danger. A rifle was slung across his back, though his hands remained visible, open, as if to show he meant no harm. He paused at the edge of the clearing, his gaze fixed upon her bound form. Her voice was raw, hoarse from thirst and fear. "Help me," she whispered, the words dragging from her throat like gravel. The man stepped closer, the light revealing a face marked by both youth and sorrow. His skin bore the weather of the plains, his cheeks scarred by some old wound. His clothes were tattered, his moccasins worn thin. She realized then he was not one of the rancher's men. He was Cheyenne. His dark eyes studied her, unreadable in their depth. He crouched low, his movements careful, like a hunter approaching prey. For a long moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the restless shift of the tethered horse. At last he spoke, his English heavy with the weight of another tongue. "You are their prisoner." Clara nodded, choking down a sob. "They left me to die." He regarded her with a mixture of pity and caution. Perhaps that would be mercy. The words struck her like a blow. Anger rose through her exhaustion, burning hotter than fear. "Then why come here? If you mean to watch me suffer, do it from the shadows." For the first time, something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps even respect. He reached for his knife, the blade flashing silver in the moonlight. Clara tensed, her body recoiling though she could not move far. But instead of harm, the knife cut swiftly through the ropes binding her wrists. Blood rushed back into her arms, and she bit down on a cry of pain. The bonds at her ankles followed, the coarse rope falling away. She crumpled to the ground, her limbs trembling, her throat raw. He did not help her rise. Instead, he stood back, watching as she struggled to her knees. "You will not live long if you stay here," he said simply. Clara forced herself to her feet, swaying with the effort. Her dress clung to her body, torn and stained, but her eyes were steady now. "Then I'll go where they cannot find me." His gaze shifted to the horizon, where the faint glow of firelight still stained the night. "They will hunt you. Their dogs will smell your blood. Their guns will find your back." "And what of you?" she asked, her voice sharper now. "Why are you here?" His jaw tightened. "They killed my family." The truth in his tone was heavier than iron. In that moment, Clara saw him not as stranger or enemy, but as something closer to her own reflection. Both broken by loss, both marked by cruelty. The prairie had stolen much from them, but it had left one thing: anger. "I'm Clara," she said softly, her voice carrying a tremor of both fear and defiance. He did not offer his name. Instead, he glanced at the sky, then back to her. If you want to live, follow me." They moved together into the night, the sound of her ragged breathing loud in her ears. The ground cut at her bare feet, every thorn tearing through skin, but she pressed on, driven by the promise of survival. Behind them, the howls of dogs split the air, distant but drawing closer. Clara's heart thundered, each step a war between collapse and endurance. They descended into a ravine, the walls of stone rising like jagged teeth around them. The Cheyenne man moved quickly, silent as a shadow, guiding her with gestures when she faltered. Once she stumbled, nearly crying out, but his hand clamped over her mouth, firm and commanding. Above, lanterns bobbed, voices barking orders in the darkness. They waited, pressed against the cold stone, until the hunters passed. Only then did he release her, his eyes warning what his voice did not. Silence meant survival. Hours dragged on. The land tested them with every step. Thorny brush that tore at their skin, streams that chilled their bones as they waded through, the constant ache of hunger gnawing at their bellies. Clara's body screamed for rest, but the image of Samuel's lifeless form kept her upright. She would not join him yet, not while the man who ordered his death still breathed. At dawn, they collapsed near a thicket, concealed from open view. Clara's chest rose and fell in harsh, uneven gasps. The Cheyenne man built a small fire, careful to shield it from sight. As the flames licked upward, he studied her with the same quiet intensity as before. "You fight," he said, his words blunt. Most would have begged for death. Clara stared into the fire, her face hollowed by exhaustion. "I've lost everything. All that's left is to fight." He nodded once, as though this answer satisfied him. Then, for the first time, he spoke of himself. His name was Tyanada, his wife, his son, his brother, slain by the same men who had bound her to die beneath the stars. His village burned, his people scattered. He carried the weight of vengeance like a blade at his side. In the silence that followed, Clara felt something shift. They were no longer strangers bound by chance, but two wounded souls tied by the cruelty of the same enemy. For the first time since Samuel's death, she felt less alone. The day passed in fragments of uneasy rest, interrupted by the cry of hawks above and the distant echo of riders combing the land. When night fell again, they pressed onward, crossing rivers slick with stone and shadow. Once, wolves circled at the edge of their firelight, yellow eyes gleaming. Clara clutched a branch, her body trembling, but Tyanada's rifle cracked and the predators scattered. Each trial they endured carved trust where once suspicion had lived. Exhaustion became their constant companion. Yet, within it grew something fiercer than survival, a bond. Around the third night's fire, Clara's voice broke the silence. "When Samuel died, I thought I died too. But now, I see I was only waiting for this fight." Tyanada's eyes glowed in the firelight, solemn and unyielding. "The land remembers the blood spilled upon it. We carry the duty to answer it." Clara met his gaze, her own filled with a fire she had not known she possessed. "Then we'll answer it together." He said nothing more, but the silence carried an agreement stronger than any oath. The nights were long, the dangers unrelenting, yet with each passing mile Clara felt her strength harden. The woman who had once been bound and helpless was gone. In her place rose someone sharpened by grief, forged by suffering. She was no longer running. She was preparing. By the time they crested the ridge overlooking the rancher's valley, the dawn spread crimson across the land, a blood-stained promise written in the sky. Clara stood beside Tyanada, her fists clenched, her heart steady. The men who had taken everything from them waited below, their campfires flickering in the early light. She did not flinch, not anymore. The day would come when blood answered blood, and the West would remember what it had chosen to forget. The valley below was a scar on the land, carved by greed and blood. Smoke curled from campfires, rifles leaned against saddles, horses tethered in restless clusters. The rancher's men lounged like wolves fattened on the kill, their laughter coarse, carrying across the cool dawn air. Clara stood at the ridge, her hands clenched into fists so tight her nails broke skin. Beside her, Tyanida was silent, his gaze fixed on the enemy below. His jaw was stone, his eyes unreadable, but the way his hand rested on his rifle told her enough. He was ready. The rancher himself stood at the heart of the camp, barking orders. His vest gleamed with fresh oil, his boots polished, as if he meant to show the land itself he could not be dirted. He looked like a man who believed the world belonged to him and to him alone. Clara's breath hitched, hatred twisting in her chest until she could barely keep it inside. This was the man who had torn Samuel from her arms, who had left her for the sun and coyotes. The man who had destroyed Tyanida's family without remorse. She wanted nothing more than to feel the sharp kick of a rifle in her shoulder and watch him fall. But vengeance was not so easily seized. She knew it. Tyanida knew it. One misstep, and the land would cradle their bodies as it had cradled countless others. "We strike at dawn," he said softly, his words carrying the weight of ritual. "The light blinds them, but we must be swift." Clara nodded. The fire in her chest gave her no room for fear, only resolve. When the first crack of rifle fire split the morning, chaos erupted. Tyanida's shot dropped a guard before the camp fully stirred. Clara followed, her hands trembling but steady enough, the weapon cold against her cheek as she squeezed the trigger. The bullet tore through canvas, through flesh, and a cry went up. Men scrambled for guns, shouting curses, while horses screamed and reared. The battle was a storm. Smoke, dust, the snap of gunfire, and the raw sound of men dying filled the valley. Clara moved through it as if carried by something beyond herself. Her body shook, her breath came ragged, yet her hands did not falter. Every pull of the trigger was for Samuel. For every settler slaughtered, every Cheyenne cut down, every woman left screaming beneath the prairie sky. Tyanida was a shadow at her side, swift and merciless. His rifle cracked, his knife flashed, his movements honed by years of survival. Together they carved a path through the camp, driving the rancher's men into confusion. Yet the tide was vast, and for every man that fell, another seemed to rise with hate in his eyes. Clara ducked behind a wagon, the wood splintering as bullets chewed into it. Her chest burned with every breath, the world narrowing to the pounding of her heart and the smoke stinging her eyes. She heard Tyanida cry out, a sound sharp and brief. She turned, saw him stagger, blood blooming against his side. "No!" The word tore from her throat. He stumbled, dropped to one knee, but even wounded he lifted his rifle and fired again. His voice reached her, raw and commanding. "Go! The rancher, he is yours." Clara's vision blurred with fury and grief. She wanted to drag him with her, to shield him as he had shielded her, but she knew the truth. This was his sacrifice, his blood for hers, his vengeance bound in hers. If she faltered, both their stories would end here. Rising from cover, she pushed forward, weaving through smoke and screams, her eyes fixed on the figure standing tall amidst the chaos. The rancher had drawn his pistol, calm even as his men fell around him. He saw her, and for the first time, a smile spread across his face. "You again," he said, his voice carrying even above the roar of battle. "I thought the buzzards had you." Clara leveled her rifle, but he moved with the ease of a man who had lived too long by the gun. His shot cracked, and the dirt near her foot exploded. She fired back, the bullet grazing his hat, spinning it from his head. The two of them circled, smoke and fire framing their dance, every step charged with hate. "You don't belong here," he spat, his pistol steady. "None of you do. This land is mine." Clara's voice shook, but her words were iron. "This land belongs to the dead you left behind." They fired. Wood shattered, metal clanged, men screamed in the distance, but for Clara there was only him, only this moment. She moved closer, her rifle nearly empty, her breath ragged. He smirked, his confidence unshaken. "You can't kill me," he said. "You don't have it in you." Her hands trembled. She thought of Samuel, of his blood on her dress, of the life stolen before it began. She thought of Tyanida, fighting still, his lifeblood spilling into the dirt. She thought of herself, tied beneath the stars, abandoned as less than human. Her finger tightened. The shot tore through the silence, and the rancher staggered, his eyes wide with disbelief. Blood spread across his vest, staining the polish he prized. He fell to his knees, still clutching the pistol, but the strength drained from his body. His lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. He collapsed into the dirt, the dust rising to claim him. Clara stood over him, her chest heaving, the rifle slipping from her grasp. She stared down at the lifeless man, and for the first time since Samuel's death, she felt the weight of vengeance lift from her shoulders. Not gone, but transformed. Behind her, the sounds of battle ebbed. The remaining men fled, their courage broken with their leader's fall. Smoke hung heavy, and the valley was quiet save for the moans of the dying. Clara turned, her eyes searching. She found Tyanida slumped against a wagon, blood soaking his side. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands trembling as she pressed against the wound. "You stay with me," she whispered fiercely. "Do you hear? You stay." His gaze was dim, but a faint smile touched his lips. "The land remembers," he murmured, his voice no more than breath. "You must live for it now." Tears blurred her sight. "I can't." "You can," he said, his hand weak against hers. "You already have." And then his hand fell away, and the light left his eyes. Clara bowed her head, grief racking her body until no sound came, only silence. The fire around them smoldered, the air heavy with death and ash. When at last she rose, her body was broken, her heart raw, but her spirit unyielding. She looked once more at the rancher's corpse, at the man who believed humanity could be buried beneath boots and bullets. And she turned away. The sun crested the horizon, painting the land in blood-red light. Clara walked into it, her steps unsteady yet certain. She carried with her not just her own survival, but the memory of Samuel, of Tyanida, of every voice silenced by cruelty. The West would not remember their names, but she would, and in that remembrance lay defiance. A voice, deep and steady, rose within the silence of the closing tale. The frontier was never about justice. It was about endurance, about whether a soul could hold its humanity when all else was stripped away. Clara had held hers, and in doing so, she had taken back the land that sought to erase her. So, what do we take from this story? Maybe only this: the West was not just a place, but a crucible. Some emerged as beasts, some fell as victims, but a few, a precious few, walked out carrying the fire of their spirit still intact. If her story has moved you, let it not end here. Share it, speak it, and ask yourself, when the world forgets its humanity, will you still remember yours?